Ladies and gentlemen, Rebecca Watson.
Thank you very much. That was such a nice introduction, Joe. Did everybody see Joe on Bones last night? Am I the only one that watches that show? Yeah, there's one person in the back. Yeah, it's this detective show. Did you see it, Joe?
Yes.
That was you, except for he was mean. Oh.
Well, it had my sport coat and shirt.
Yes, it had the Joe Nickel trademark sports coat. That's how we knew it was him. Yeah, it was a debunker, which Joe is not. Joe is an investigator. But, yeah, there was a debunker who got murdered by a chupacabra. So, so now you're famous. So thank you so much for coming out. I was a bit worried that maybe you all wouldn't know who I was beforehand, but I've been informed that the Insane Clown Posse magnets I made were sold very well at the front desk. So thank you. So yeah, that gives me hope that maybe this is my crowd. For those of you who don't know who I am, I am on a podcast called The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. And if you don't know, a podcast is like a radio show on the internet. And we get about 80,000 listeners a week. Oh, and don't feel bad if you didn't know what a podcast is, because I didn't know what one was before I was on this one. So yeah, that's a good time. And I'm also I run the website Skepchick. I just wanted to mention that we recently expanded. So now we have Skepchick at skepchick.org, which is focused on science and skepticism and feminism. It's a group blog. There are about 12-ish ladies now writing, and one guy. We had to throw in a token guy because otherwise it looked sexist. So that's Skepchick. And then we also have Teen Skepchick, which is just like Skepchick, but younger. And that's for teens and by teens. Slightly less profanity. And then we also have skepchick.se, which is our Swedish version, led by a team of Swedish ladies. And I have no idea what they blog about because it's in Swedish. But I've been assured that it's a good site, so there's that. And then we also recently launched the Mad Art Lab, which is basically about the intersection between science, skepticism, and art. And so those are currently what I'm doing, what I'm up to. And earlier today, while I was thinking about my talk tonight, I happened to get a Skype message from the girl who runs Teen Skepchick for me. And this is how it went. Can I say douchebag on Teen Skepchick? And I said yes, but only if you include a disclaimer that douches are harmful. And she thought I was joking. But I was not. This comes up a lot, actually. For instance, on The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, which I do with four men, I remember a while back I called someone a douchebag. And by the way, are there any children in the audience? No, okay, just Joe. Okay. So yeah, I called someone a douchebag on the show, and the guys said, "Well, that's weird that you would say that. Isn't that a sexist term?" And I pointed out that no, it's not, because douches are really harmful to women. And that was met with silence. They had no idea what I was talking about. Because, and I'm sure that a lot of you don't know what I'm talking about either, which is why I open every talk with douches, with douche talk. Because I find that people don't know, because you see the ads for it, and they're all really happy, and it's all about these women who are like owning their lives, and they're having fun. Nobody really knows why. It's like because of douche. But the truth of the matter is that douche is quite dangerous for women. All it is really is a mixture of water and vinegar, or sometimes some other acid or detergent that you squirt into your vagina. By the way, I'm going to be saying the word vagina a lot during this talk. I hope everybody's cool with that. It's just a piece of anatomy. It's all right. So yeah, that's basically what it is. It's a way to clean out your vagina. And back in the day, it used to be advertised like this. Lysol was a douche. It was sold as an antiseptic that you were to put inside your body to clean yourself out. What these ads never made clear, I mean, they make it very clear that you're supposed to be embarrassed that you have a vagina, and you have to worry about what men think about it all the time. It could be the cause of your marriage troubles, or maybe that's why you haven't gotten married. But anyway, you need to get Lysol and put it inside you. And the thing is, Lysol no longer advertises itself as a douche, but there are still other douches out there. It's basically the same stuff. It's like firebombing your vagina. What these ads don't make clear is that the vagina is actually a self-cleaning thing. You're not supposed to clean the inside of it. If you have problems with your vagina, then you need to see a doctor. What douche does is it wipes out all the good bacteria in your vagina, and that leaves it open to infection from bad bacteria. That can get in there. It can cause serious problems like sterility. So there's really nothing good about douche. It's still being advertised, not quite in the same way, but they're still focusing on making you think really hard about your vagina more than you probably wanted to. This is a recent ad from Summer's Eve, which is the most popular. They're the ones who did those commercials in the 70s or 80s about a daughter saying to her mother, "Did you ever get that not-so-fresh feeling?" That's Summer's Eve. Now, I don't know about you ladies in here, but I'm sure we've all had that experience where you go and you ask the boss for a raise and you don't get it and you're not really sure why. Well, Summer's Eve would like you to know that it's because of your vagina. And I don't mean that in like a feminist sense, like we make 70 cents to the dollar sort of thing and don't get promoted. I mean, it's literally your vagina. This is their advice for asking for a raise. First thing, wash your vagina. Also, throw a packet of Summer's Eve cleaning cloths into your bag for a quick freshness pick-me-up during the day. Because that's how I do pick-me-ups during the day, not like a cup of coffee. No, I nip off to the bathroom to clean my vagina. So I have a real problem, obviously, with products like this. There's a real problem with products that are being marketed specifically toward women and playing off of their insecurities and certain stereotypes. Sometimes these products are just harmless. They don't do anything at all. But sometimes they're actively harmful. And these are the sort of things that I think skeptics usually do a really good job of investigating and telling the public about. But when it comes to things like douche, skeptics don't normally stand up and do that because it's kind of embarrassing to talk about, and vaginas are weird and scary. So that's sort of why I wanted to do this talk, because I wanted to talk about the things that are skeptical. They're skeptical topics, but we don't always address them because it's just all men up until now that have been up on stages like this. We've got more women. Oh, I'm knocking this microphone around. I'm sorry. We have more women, obviously, that are stepping up, and so I think we're going to see topics like this addressed more often. But I just wanted to give you an overview of some of the BS that's targeted at women. The inspiration for this talk actually comes from another stupid product. This is the Schick Intuition. It's a revolutionary razor blade. No, they didn't add like a 14th blade. What they did was they put a block of lathering stuff around the blade so you don't have to deal with shaving cream. And they advertise this the way that advertisers always advertise things. They start by inventing a problem that doesn't exist. And in this case, the problem is that women are too stupid to use shaving cream. So the commercial shows, first there's a woman and she's spraying shaving cream into her face for some reason. And then this woman down here has got her foot balanced on a sink and the razor's in her mouth and she's talking on the phone. I don't know who does this. And then at the end of the commercial, we're told that it's okay, ladies. You obviously don't understand how to use shaving cream, but you do have your intuition. And so it wasn't just that it was a dumb commercial that made women look dumb, but it was the fact that they were using this word intuition, which I've heard so often invoked in the name of bullshit. It's sold to us as something positive, something we should embrace our intuition. But I don't really see what the point of intuition is if I'm too stupid to use shaving cream as a result. Because that's the idea, isn't it? The idea is that men have logic and reason, and women don't have that. But somehow they still manage to make sandwiches and things for the men. So they must be figuring that out somehow. So maybe it comes from this mysterious place, this intuition. I don't really know, though. I don't really know what intuition is or where it comes from or anything. So I decided to look to the experts for people who are actually studying intuition to see what they had to say about it. I've broken those experts down into two distinct groups. Scientists, which I'll deal with first, and then after that we will discuss the idiots. And I want to be clear that when I say idiots, these people are actually quite smart in a way, because they're finding a way to make a lot of money off of women, which you'll see in a few minutes when I get to that part. But first we're going to start with the scientists. And I'd like to start by talking about a researcher who looked into the larger body of research that had been done on intuition in the 90s and up until about the year 2000. His name is Lars Erik Bjorklund. He's a Swedish researcher. And this was in 2008. He wrote a dissertation on intuition. And he defined it as the ability to make insightful decisions quickly based on gut reactions. So without taking a long time to think over your decisions, without any conscious effort. So he looked at studies that were focused on people in professions that were under a tremendous amount of stress. One of the big studies he looked at was on nurses. He saw that nurses did have a very keen ability to make these quick decisions based on very little information, and to make the right decisions again and again and again. And, a lot of nurses are women. And so that was, the nurses themselves seemed to attribute that to this sort of female intuition. But what Bjorklund found when he looked at other studies of similar jobs, so businessmen, physicians, people who were also under high pressure to make decisions, what he found was that it was people who had been in those professions for a very long time that had this seeming intuition. His theory is that the brain can build up these sort of connections. When we experience something, all of our senses sort of come together. We kind of take a snapshot of an experience that really affects us. And if we do that again and again and again and again, it's kind of like practice makes perfect. Your brain gets really good at calling up that memory and making the decision, remembering what went wrong last time, what went right, and then making the right decision when the time comes. So we found that regardless of what gender you were in, the only real thing that mattered was how long you had been in that particular business. So that was Bjorklund. I also want to talk to you quickly about my friend Richard Wiseman, who I asked him for a favor, and in response he said to plug his book. So buy Richard's stupid book. No, Richard's fantastic, and this is his new book, and you should get it. It's fantastic. But back in 2005, he did a study on intuition, but it was a bit of a different kind of intuition to what Bjorklund was studying. Richard was looking into the type of intuition where you understand what a person is thinking and feeling who you're interacting with, which is another thing that women are supposed to be better at. Just understanding, like mind reading, but on a face-to-face sort of non-crazy level, not like ESP, but you know what I'm talking about. So what Richard did was he had 15,000 subjects look at two different pictures of the same person, one in which the person had a genuine smile and one in which the person had a fake smile. And they were to pick out which smile was genuine. And they did this over and over and over again for 15,000 subjects. And what he found was really interesting, but first I wanted to test you guys and see how intuitive you all are. So I'm going to show you two faces, face A and face B. Can everybody see those all right? Examine them, and then by round of applause, I want you to tell me which one you think is the genuine smile. So who thinks it's A? Oh. Oh, all right, we got a couple. Don't be shy. Okay, and who thinks it's B? Everybody else. Okay, well, you guys are really good. Except for you two. I'm sure you're better at other things, though. I'll give you another chance. Here's another example, A and B. Who thinks the genuine smile is A? A couple of you. And who thinks it's B? A few more. All right. Again, the majority's got it. It was B. Richard told me that the secret to discovering when someone is lying to you about their smile is not to look at the mouth, but to look at the eyes. Because a genuine smile moves your whole face. So you get these slight crinkles at the eyes and things like that. So now that you know the secret, I'll give you one more. All right. See if you can all get it. All right, ready? A. It's horrifying. No, I won't make you guess. It's obviously B. So what Richard found was similar to our results here, actually. He found about 70% of people were correctly able to identify the genuine smile on a regular basis. But when he broke it down by men versus women, he found that the results were pretty much exactly the same. Men were 72%, women were 71% able to tell a genuine smile. Men were slightly more likely to be able to tell a genuine smile when it was of someone of the opposite sex, which is weird. But yeah, so Richard found no evidence of any particular type of female intuition. I'll talk about one more really interesting one that was quite recent. This is Dr. William Ix of the University of Texas. I think that's a genuine smile. It's hard to... No, it's not. It's not. But I'm sure he's a very nice man. But for the past 20 years, Dr. Ix has studied what he calls empathic accuracy or everyday mind reading. So the same sort of thing that Richard was looking into, the ability of someone to tell what another person is thinking or feeling. And he recently decided to see if he could find women's intuition by splitting up the data and seeing if men or women were more likely to be intuitive. And they did tests, he and his team did these tests all over the country and some also in New Zealand. And test after test after test showed no difference between men and women in how intuitive they were in conversation. That was after 7 tests. And then on the 8th test, they suddenly found that women were suddenly much more likely to be intuitive. And so they said, wait a minute, something is weird here, because that came out of nowhere. So they looked at their protocol to see what had changed. And what they discovered fairly quickly was that a slight change in the wording that they were using with their subjects had tipped off the subjects to the fact that the study was about intuition. Previously, the subjects had been completely blinded to what the test was actually about. So once people knew that it was about intuition, suddenly women were doing much, much better. So he decided to test it to see if that was in fact the problem. They went back, they did their next test using the old protocol, the old language, and again the effect disappeared, completely gone. So then they did another test with the new protocol and the new language. And it came right back. Women suddenly had much better intuition. And what Ix thinks is that women were just really affected by this stereotype that they know they're supposed to be better at this, so they tried harder. And so we see this happening, this idea of stereotypes actually affecting how people behave and what they do. We see it with the intuition and also with the opposite stereotype with women, the idea that they're very good at intuition, but they're very bad at logic and reason and math. So there's a very good study back in 2007 at the University of Chicago, and they were looking into how stereotypes affect women during math tests. And what they found was really interesting. They took a bunch of women who generally performed really well on math tests, and they gave them one pre-test, and then they gave them a second test. And in between the two tests, they told one group that they were just doing an experiment on math performance, and they told another group that they were specifically testing to see why men tend to outperform women on math tests. And in the control group, the women who were just told that it was a simple performance test, their levels rose slightly during the second test. Their scores went up. For the other women, the ones who were reminded of the stereotype that women are bad at math, their scores plummeted. And they asked those women afterwards, what were you thinking during the test? Describe your thought process. And the majority of them reported that they actually were thinking about how stressful it was to have to beat the men, to have to, represent womankind. And it severely negatively impacted their scores. So these studies seem to suggest that, no, women don't have some special intuition. And also, conversely, they don't have some deficit in logic. They don't have a problem with reason. They do have a problem with stereotypes. And it's actually possible to overcome those stereotypes, luckily. Like in the case of the intuitive research that Ix did, researchers at the University of Oregon did a follow-up test in which they did the same protocol that Ix had done, in which they reminded the subjects that they were taking a test on intuition. But they also offered them a monetary reward. So if they were correctly able to guess what their partner was thinking or feeling, they got money. And what they found was that this was enough to motivate the men to catch up, and the scores evened out. When money wasn't offered, again, they saw that women did much better in intuition. And we can see the same thing with math scores. We can also combat those stereotypes. There's another really famous study that was done at Harvard in which they tested to see how women did on math tests when presented with a positive female role model. So they had control groups given tests by men, and they had other groups that were given tests by women who were presented as leading math experts in their field. And the results were incredible. The girls who were taking the math tests from the female mathematicians, their scores skyrocketed. So it's possible to combat the stereotypes, but it's important to know that the stereotypes are there. But at the end of the day, after looking at as much research as I could find, I can't find a single study that suggests that there actually is some sort of female intuition. There was one psychologist at UCLA who published a paper suggesting a way in which higher dopamine levels in women could explain intuition, but he never actually tested it and couldn't prove that there was a difference in the first place. So for now, I'm going to go ahead with the idea that there is no such thing as women's intuition. However, just wanted to show you this as well. I just saw this the other day, and I forgot I threw it in there. This is another way to combat negative stereotypes, is to raise your daughters violently. There's really no science to suggest that there's any such thing as women's intuition. But that does not stop the idiots from suggesting otherwise. And so I thought that I would tell you about a few of the most notable of the idiot explanations. Like I said, these people are actually quite smart because everybody I'm about to tell you about is making a lot more money than I am giving skeptical talks. So first up is Mona Lisa Schultz. I'm sorry, Dr. Mona Lisa Schultz, MD. She's a psychologist. She got her degree from my alma mater, which should warn you of something. Boston University. So sadly, she actually has a reputable degree. But she's written a lot of crap. And she calls herself a medical intuitive, which means that she doesn't need things like tests or science or logic to diagnose diseases. I'll show you a thing from her website. This is really good. During a medical intuitive consultation, knowing only someone's name and age, Mona Lisa discerns both a person's physical condition and the emotional state of his or her life, explaining how the two are linked. During a medical intuitive consultation, there is no physician-patient relationship, nor is any psychotherapy being performed. In other words, Dr. Schultz is completely unsuable. That's basically what that means. Her book, The New Feminine Brain, promises to provide, and I quote, important health information for using and improving your intuition, a fast form of intelligence that traditionally has been considered more readily accessible to women than men, to help balance mind and body for better health, better relationships, and an overall better life. Sounds pretty nice. She also, in her book, discusses the flip side if you don't use your intuition properly, which will result in a hellish life of constant struggle and strife. The entire book is full of science, of course, by which I mean anecdotes, which someone once told me is just like science. I'll read you one of my favorite passages in the book. It's about this woman named Betty who came to Schultz asking for help. She was feeling depressed because she was in a job that paid the bills and everything, but she didn't find it spiritually fulfilling. And so she was a bit depressed, and she came to Schultz for advice. And Schultz says that Betty failed to follow her intuition. And her intuition was telling her to quit her job and follow her true dreams of being a basket weaver or, a wallet maker or whatever. And Betty's failure to follow her intuition, her failure to follow those dreams, culminated in disease. This is the upbeat sentence that ends that passage. Thankfully, Betty's diagnosis of colon cancer made her stand up and take notice that her retirement benefits weren't worth dying for. Which is probably the first time I've ever heard colon cancer used as like an optimistic thing. And also the first time I've ever heard colon cancer used as a way to sell more books. Like, this is what can happen to you, ladies, if you don't use your intuition. Colon cancer. So that's the happy-go-lucky philosophy of Schultz. Next up is Laura Day, who is another intuitive. She calls herself a corporate intuitive, which leads me to believe that, if you just need a job where you make a lot more money than you make now, just add intuitive to whatever your job title is. So if you're in IT, just be an IT intuitive. A mechanic, just be like an auto intuitive. And you too can make tons of money. Laura Day gets paid tens of thousands of dollars by corporations to come and give them financial advice and things like that. She basically pretends to be a psychic, but the word psychic would make her look stupid, apparently, so she goes with corporate intuitive. She also hangs out with celebrities, and she's got videos of her and Demi Moore talking about how there's a great video that shows Demi Moore telling her when her intuition led her astray and she took a movie role that just wasn't right. And I'm like, you're a billionaire, shut up. Just because you made G.I. Jane and it was awful, But it's not just corporations and celebrities that Laura wants to help. You don't have to necessarily pay tens of thousands of dollars for her advice. You can just buy one of her terrible, terrible books. The Circle is my favorite and probably the one that she gets the most mileage out of. It's basically promoting the intuition as a way of life, of course, and it encourages women to create a new reality in their heads because the current reality is terrible. And then the idea is you send a mysterious energy to that reality, and then it will magically manifest itself. And just in case some of you think that this is all metaphorical, I have a screen cap from her online message board that I'd like to show you. Sasha writes, "I'm in an amazing, loving relationship with the love of my life. He is loving, responsible, affectionate, and smart. We are each other's best friends. I have a financially and emotionally fulfilling career. Please send creative energy to my new reality." So to clarify, that's not reality. That's her made-up reality, which is actually technically fantasy. And it's the forum is the saddest thing I've ever seen, because it's just post after post of that stuff, and it's all these people who are just writing down what they would eventually like to have happen in their life and pretending to send energy at it and thinking that that's going to help. To mention my friend Richard Wiseman again, he studied something similar to this idea that focusing on your goals can make them happen. And what he found was that people who did just focus on their goals above all else never reached those goals for the most part. People who made step-by-step instructions on how to reach those goals and then focused on the steps are the ones who end up reaching their goals. But things like this, unfortunately, don't actually work. But it is enough to get Laura Day a ton of money. You might recognize this sort of philosophy. It's well known now as The Secret. It's basically the same thing. The secret is the power, the law of attraction. And it's the same idea. You imagine your ideal life, and then you wish hard enough. You act as though it already exists. So if let's say I really want a keytar, I would actually, go on stages and pretend to play the keytar, and eventually the universe would give me one because I've been acting like I have one. That's the philosophy behind it. This came out quite a while ago now, several years ago, but it's actually still really popular. They just came out with a sequel called The Power, which is like The Secret, but add the word quantum here and there, and you've got The Power. And so that's selling millions of copies. They have The Secret, the movie as well. It's making millions of dollars off of selling women this fake dream, that they're going to get everything they want. They can cure disease. They can, get all of the money they want. All they have to do is wish hard enough. They don't actually have to work for anything. I first learned about The Secret through a woman that you might have heard of called Jenny McCarthy. Are we familiar with Jenny McCarthy for the most part? I'm so sorry. Jenny is known now for different things, which I'll get to in a second. But when I first became acquainted with her, for those who don't know, she was a model and a personality who eventually she had a baby, and she decided that the baby was magical. There's really no sane way to put that. That's what she thought. Jenny believed that she was something called an indigo child. And indigo children are these alien beings with blonde hair and blue eyes, like a very, super race sort of look, and a piercing gaze and a disinterest in interacting with other lesser children. That's the idea, is that they're taking children who are just a bit weird, maybe don't get along with their peers, and they're turning them from that into this amazing psychic, usually super being. Jenny even started a website all about the Indigo Children, and it's gone now, but the internet never forgets. And so I found a screenshot of the message board where she recommends to all of her followers to check out The Secret, and I thought I would read that to you. Hey, Jenny, I just finished watching The Secret. Let's talk. I'm such a geek, though, because I cried when it was over. Lol. Thoughts become things. Love, Michelle. And then Jenny responds, hey, Michelle, I'm so glad you liked it. I even made a vision board, just like that guy did in the movie, and have it up in my house. The name of the movie is perfect because it does feel like it was a secret, because if we would have known this information sooner, we would have shifted the world into a blissful light ball by now. Lol. Love, Jenny. P.S. Make a vision board. So a vision board is like a collage that you make out of cut up bits of magazine and things like that. And it's words and pictures and all that you're envisioning, that you want to happen in your life. And so to give you an example, like I made my own vision board and I put a unicorn on there that shits cupcakes and a guitar, obviously, and Jenny McCarthy riding a rocket ship into a supernova, and a TARDIS. I've had this for like 4 years now. I'm not even lying. I've actually had this on my computer. No, none of this has occurred yet, but one of these days, one of these things will happen, and that's going to be the greatest talk I've ever given. I'll start with, you know what, I take it all back, everybody. They were all right. So Jenny McCarthy eventually moved on from her indigo child phase. She eventually decided that her kid wasn't a magical psychic being, but was actually autistic. Same difference, basically. And it was actually, before it was a fun-loving, sort of stupid thing she was doing that I don't think really hurt too many people, except for the horrible kids that I saw parading around Maury Povich that their parents were claiming were indigo children. They're probably messed up for life. But for the most part, the indigo child thing wasn't a really big deal. But once Jenny determined that her child was autistic, she also decided that the autism was caused by vaccines. Jenny doesn't need science, and she doesn't need doctors or experts. Jenny has a thing called mommy instinct, which is another way to say intuition. She has this thing inside of her that tells her exactly what is right and what is wrong, and that's how she makes her decisions. And unfortunately, when it comes to vaccines, that has a real negative impact on society. Just to give you an overview of measles. Before 1963, 3 to 4 million people every year contracted measles. 48,000 were hospitalized, 1,000 developed chronic disability, 400 to 500 people died every year from measles. In 1963, they started handing out the vaccine, and it was outrageously effective. It was brilliant. It went down to, by the year 2000, measles were declared eliminated from the United States. They only had 60 cases per year in 2007, and those were usually from immigrants coming in from outside the U.S. Kids were immediately vaccinated, and things were generally okay. Then in 2006, 2007, Andrew Wakefield got really big in the UK. Wakefield published a paper that claimed there was a link between vaccines and autism. And it was published in The Lancet. It's since been revoked. That's not the word I was looking for. It was pulled, and The Lancet apologized because it was thoroughly debunked. It was a terrible study. There was really nothing right about it. And yet, Wakefield's influence continues to be seen today. And our wonderful American idiot celebrities are sort of helping to spread this idea that vaccines cause autism, when in fact there's just no science to back that up. So Jenny came on the scene and started spreading the word in the U.S., and in the first quarter of 2008, there were 64 cases. In 2007, there were 60 total. The first quarter of 2008, there were 64. 131 cases by July of that year. And half of those were unvaccinated children who specifically were not vaccinated because their parents were afraid. So she had a real tangible effect on scaring parents into not vaccinating their children. We're working on combating this. On Skepchick, we've sort of launched an all-out attack on anti-vaccination people. This was back in November. There was a group that wanted to run an anti-vax ad in front of movies during Thanksgiving weekend. We found out about it about 3 days before they were set to launch, and we launched a campaign, and we had such a huge response that AMC, which is one of the largest theater chains here in the U.S., agreed to pull the ads and not run them. That really pissed off the anti-vaxxers, and they've continued trying to get their message out into the mainstream. Recently, they have been advertising in Times Square as part of CBS's media chain. They've been putting up video billboards and things like that. So now we have a new campaign where we're encouraging people to complain to CBS. The American Pediatric Association just got on board, and they've issued a rebuke of CBS. So we're hoping that eventually we will win that one as well. But it's basically become a full-time job for one of the Skepchicks, Elise Anders. She is a mother, and so she's taken it on herself to be the skeptic, to actually go out there and speak to other mothers as a mother about why they should vaccinate their kids. She started up a whole organization called Women Thinking Freely Foundation, and they launched a campaign called the Hug Me campaign, Hug Me, I'm Vaccinated. So they're doing their best to combat this sort of BS. But there's another side to what Jenny McCarthy is doing that I feel is a bit more difficult to combat. And I'll illustrate it by showing you a letter written by another mother with a child with autism. Her name is Lisa Jo Rudy. She writes for the autism section of About.com. And Lisa Jo is a lot like Jenny McCarthy in that, when she had her child diagnosed with autism, she was really scared and confused, and she didn't know what to do. And so she saw Jenny McCarthy out there on television proclaiming that she had this mommy instinct. And she wasn't really sure what to make of it all. She had this conversation with a friend who attempted to cheer her up by telling her that she should be more like Jenny, that she should fight for what she knows is right. And this is what Lisa Jo writes. At the time of that conversation, I was too chicken to say what I really felt, that I didn't have that mommy instinct that would provide my child with all he needed. I just nodded and smiled and felt insufficient, overwhelmed, and terrified that I'd be found out as an ordinary, unsuper mom. Over time, I've come to the conclusion that the mommy instinct may be much less common than we think. Sure, we moms can tell without looking when our kids are sneaking treats. We may know that something's wrong when our child has stomach aches before school every day. But I just can't believe that mommy instinct can diagnose illness, recommend treatment, preview the future, and provide for every contingency, any more than I can believe that mothers, by virtue of their special powers, can single-handedly advocate their children into physical and mental wellness. I think Lisa Jo was right on point with her problem with mommy instincts, aka intuition. It's a superpower that we're supposed to have that we don't actually have. And I think you can see how heartbreaking that becomes when you're a mother who all you want to do is help your kid. And you're surrounded by a bunch of people telling you that you should know what to do and that what you should do doesn't always match what the experts are telling you to do. That's a tremendous amount of pressure to put on someone, particularly a mother who's just found out that her kid has autism. So, Lisa Jo luckily was strong enough to put that aside and admit that she's a human, that she's not an expert, and that she's just going to do the best research she can and then rely on the experts, the doctors who want to help her kid. So I really appreciated her speaking out about that, and I think it illustrates my main problem with women's intuition is just the fact that it's a superpower I'm supposed to have that I don't even have. And it's like it's trying to make you feel like less of a woman if you don't have it. So one thing I want to end with is I want to draw your attention to the fact that there's been a thread running through this talk that I haven't really mentioned. And it's kind of like, in a sci-fi series where there's, one big bad guy behind the scenes, pulling all the strings that you don't find out about until the end. That bad guy is Oprah. Okay, Oprah is the worst. And the thing is, she has had something to do with every single thing I've talked about today. In 2007, she gave Jenny McCarthy a stage to rant about anti-vax nonsense. She launched The Secret into becoming a New York Times bestseller. Nobody had heard of it before she had the authors on her stage promoting it. They've been back several times since. Laura Day and Mona Lisa Schultz have both been on the show, providing their intuition services to Oprah's audience. I didn't really talk about her too much, but Mona Lisa's co-author, Christiane Northrup, is Oprah's stand-in gynecologist who, and this is awful, and you should thank me profusely for not including this video, but Christiane was on Oprah once teaching the audience how to direct energy toward their vajayjays. They literally called it vajayjays, like they're 10. By putting, I think it was put one hand on your upper heart and one hand on your lower heart. She had like the whole Oprah audience doing this, and it was really disturbing to watch a bunch of like 40 to 50-year-old women pleasuring themselves on national television. So yeah, and then that brings us back to the beginning, back to douche. And while I don't think Oprah has ever actually advertised for douche on her show, she has had the biggest douche in the universe on her show. So I think that counts. Of course, I mean, that's just a small amount of what I could fit into this brief lecture. Oprah has had a million other things on her show that are terrible for women. Dr. Oz is probably the most recent. That's a whole other lecture that I could give you. So yeah, she's just awful. And she's, her show is ending, which is great, but she's started her own network, so now she can have a million shows if she wants to peddle this nonsense. So, now we're left with, well, what do we do about this? I was at a publisher's office a few months ago talking about the possibility of doing a book, and we were batting ideas around, and I said, I've got it. What about a book about Oprah? Because I hate everything she does. And I think I could write like a really good skeptical book on Oprah. And he just goes, no. I said, why not? Oprah's popular. Like that would be a big name. And he goes, Oprah controls the publishing industry. It was like I had stumbled upon this giant publishing conspiracy theory. Like, don't touch Oprah. Because her book club, they sell a lot of books. So it's difficult to try to bring down someone like Oprah. So I know you're all probably sitting here wondering, well, what the hell are we supposed to do then? Of course, you could go on Skeptic and you could participate in the letter writing campaigns and things like that. But I do have one suggestion that I would recommend to all of you, and I mean all of you, not just the women in the audience, but the men as well. Anybody who really wants to see superstition combated, who wants to see an end to the damaging stereotypes that we make about women, what you need to do is make a vision board. Thank you. we have time for Q&A, I guess? Or, I don't know, is there a microphone for them? Oh, I can see. Look at you. Sexy bunch. Oh, and I was here last month, and I saw what you guys did. Those of you who were here last month, like, those were tough questions. So I'm just saying, be nice.
First of all, I would like to say I don't think former President George Bush would like your comment.
Noted.
To me, and the whole thing with women's intuition, you see it as a negative stereotype against women, it seems. I've always thought it was a thing to say women are superior. Maybe they are for other reasons, but certainly not for that, because men have intuition too. But it reminds me of when you're in a discussion with a woman, some women, not all women, of course, and
no, keep hedging.
There's a default position to where they can't answer the thing logically, so they say, well, it's women's intuition. And it reminds me of when you're talking to a religious or a churchgoer, and they can't answer the question, so you just got to have faith. You know, it's sort of like this magical whatever, and it's just very frustrating to talk with someone like that.
Well, to address the idea that, you know, it makes women superior. You know, I'm just a writer. I'm not a historian or a scientist or anything like that. But it's my guess that, you know, for several millennia, women have had no rights at all and have been pretty consistently beaten down and told to sit down and shut up and to not try to think logically and not try to think rationally, because that's not for them. That's for the men folk. Women's job is to have the babies. And so when you have that much taken away from you, when you can't even go to school, when you can't, even if you want an education, when you can't pursue it, what are you going to reach for? Me? Okay, I might make up the idea that I have some superpower that men don't have. I mean, if nothing else, to regain just a tiny little bit of power that's been taken from me and from other women for so long. So, yeah, I mean, I could definitely see, and it's certainly, you know, these days it is promoted as something that women should be proud of, that it's something that they should feel superior about. But the problem with it, as I hope I've sort of shown, is the idea that the more we trumpet this idea of women's intuition, the less we're able to point out women's logic and women's reasoning, women's skepticism, which exists. It's just human logic and human reasoning. And that's my goal, I think, is to level that. So, you know, if you're talking to someone and you think that they haven't understood what you said, and she falls back on this idea of, well, it's just women's intuition, I encourage her to think logically. Tell her in the nicest way you can that she's an intelligent, rational human being who can think logically about things, and it doesn't make her less of a woman. You know, it's a bigger problem than just addressing on a one-by-one, you know, method. It's a societal problem, but, you know, I guess we have to do it. When you're on the ground like that, I think it helps every little bit to encourage women to think critically.
Rebecca, Dave Baker, your comment on this, as my family was growing up, my child would say to me, Papa, fix? And having a father who taught me how to use tools and having the good ability to have an engineering degree, I've been able to fix things. Not going to the moon, but normal stuff. And I'm told by some people that if I'm with a lady and she has a problem with her car, I know what the problem is, I can fix it. But she wants a shoulder to cry on, not to fix the problem. Give me your comments on the thought that a woman don't really want an instant answer or just repair. They want an emotional, let me hold your hand, what do you think about that? I've heard people say that's what women really want, is that shoulder to cry on.
I think that there are over 3 billion women on the planet. And I don't think you're going to get very far assuming that that's what they want. Yeah, And I think it's worth noting that, sometimes we fall back on those sort of stereotypes, and it's to the detriment of just simple human communication. We forget that somebody, it's imagine if you were to say, well, she's a Virgo, so she's going to be all emotional, and I should talk to her like this. No, people are different. There's a lot of them. So yeah, I'd just help her fix her car if I were you. Hi.
A couple of weeks ago, we had a professor come in here and talk about atheism and magical thinking. And basically, you're on the same wavelength. I don't know what the percentage of population is atheist or not, maybe 2%, 3%. So we have 3% people who really think, and 97% people who are magical thinkers. That's why Oprah is so successful. She has an audience of 97%.
I'll go one step further on you. I'll say that we have 100% magical thinkers. I think that I think it's helpful to remember that, we're humans, and everybody has some weird belief. And I've met atheists who have weird beliefs. I've met Christians who are skeptical about everything else except for their religion. The human brain is just remarkably good at compartmentalizing your beliefs. And one thing that I like to think of in my own life that sort of brought that to my attention is, actually you should read, if you've never read it, Bruce Hood's book, Supersense, or Dan Ariely's book, Predictably Irrational. Two really great books that point out easy ways that we're fooled in our everyday life. Bruce Hood talks about the way we ascribe essences to things. So if I were to hold up a cardigan and ask who in this room would wear the cardigan for $10, most of you would probably put up your hand, seeing a good deal, But if I were to then tell you that it was Charles Manson's cardigan, a lot of the hands would come down, even amongst a bunch of skeptics. And even I would think, like, ooh. Also, I go to skeptics conferences all the time, and people, and it's awesome when they do, people come up and ask me for my autograph or for a picture. Why? What's different about the piece of paper once I sign it? But they would put a lot more value on that piece of paper than the total amount of paper and ink that's on it. And it's because they're ascribing this magical essence to it. And it's things like that we might not think about on a day-to-day basis, but that really are magical, superstitious thinking. They don't cause as much harm, of course, as a lot of other superstitious beliefs. But I think it's worth keeping in mind when we talk about people who do have irrational beliefs, to remember that they can be really skeptical about a lot of other things. They have the tools. They have the skepticism. They just need to apply it to a few more things. And of course, that's me being really kind and optimistic. If I were talking in particular about Jenny McCarthy, I would probably be a lot meaner. But in general, for the believer, I think it's just helpful to think about things like that.
You indicate that this can be very harmful. Well, obviously, in our political system, you've got one political party that thinks if you keep on cutting taxes, your debt will go down. And now we have a huge problem in the United States and maybe the world coming up, certainly I think it's May, when they're going to be voting on whether to raise the debt limit, and that could crash the world's economy. So
I wouldn't worry about it. The world's going to end in May.
It's true.
Hi. Have you found a correlation between religion and intuition? Because I was not raised in a traditional religious family, and I studied physics, math, became an electrician in the Air Force. It never occurred to me that I couldn't do any of those things. It was never presented that I had to go become, Betty Homemaker or whatever. So I was just curious if you had found that in your studies.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I feel that religion is often used as an excuse for misogyny, and a lot of people, and it's not just Christians, in other religions as well, they go to the holy books, and the holy books are usually incredibly misogynist. And that doesn't mean that everybody in that religion is going to be misogynist, but it does mean that if you want a good excuse to keep your woman at home having babies, there's a really easy way to do that. The Quiverful movement is one example of that. That's a Christian culty thing where the idea is that literally a woman's only job is to be an oven for babies. And so women are encouraged to have as many as possible. And so these are people like, there's some reality show, The Duggars, I think. I don't know. But those are Quiverful. And the women are just terribly oppressed in a way. And there's a really good blog called No Longer Quivering, where a former Quiverful woman writes about her experiences very eloquently. So I'd recommend reading up on that. But yeah, I do agree that religion can be a great evil when it comes to feminism. So yeah, thanks. Any other questions? No? Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody.